to the world. Subscribe now to the Hot 97 YouTube channel. It's Ebro in the Morning with Laura Stiles and Rosenberg.
Ebro, Laura Rosenberg. Rosenberg's traveling today for WWE. He's really missing our friend of the show, Carmen Perez, back on the program as we gear up for this 2021 legislative situation here in New York State. We got some issues to deal with. Good morning.
Good morning. What's up, everybody?
What's
so happy
poppin'?
to be back to New York and back on this show.
Well,
That's
listen,
right,
we're so happy to have you back on the show. We've had a chance to keep up with you throughout, your marriage and 2 children now. We've watched you grow over the years, before the Women's March and when you and Tamika and Linda and everybody bust on the scene in the mainstream. But, we just had Tamika last week celebrating her book, but it's important, I think.
Shout out to Tamika for her State of Emergency book. Congratulations, sister. She's doing big things, and she deserves it. She's been working in this field for, 2 decades and she's put in the time. And so I'm really glad y'all had her.
Yeah, well, and I just wanted to point out for the audience, we always talk about, like, when we make, listen, it was dealing with Trump and elections and these things, or it was, dealing with raise the age, or whether it was Statute 50A, and the many reasons we've had you and others on the program. You guys continue to do this work, right? Because there's still a lot of changes and a lot of work that needs to be done, in the legislative process, as well as electing people who are going to make sure these things happen, correct?
Of course. So, a lot of people see us out in the streets protesting or organizing marches, but we're also playing the inside game. We have to make sure that we pass laws or advocate for laws to be passed in order for us to also receive justice. A lot of the marches that we organize or even the protests all have demands, or they're all connected to legislative priorities that we've been working on with other organizations and in coalition. And so, talking about parole justice in New York, there are 2 bills in the New York State legislature that would make important changes to parole in New York State. One is fair and timely parole, and one is elder parole. I'll tell you more about each of those, but I want to begin by letting your listeners know before the pandemic, New Yorkers' parole releases were trending in the right direction. Though they were still low, more people were able to get parole through the majority. Though the majority were still being denied, it went from 10 to 15% releases to about 30 to 40%. That's a significant difference. And then unfortunately, during the pandemic, the peak of the pandemic, a lot of the releases were fewer and the cases were fewer. So we also know this is a racial justice issue. Ebro, you see this every day. Laura Stiles, you see this every day. There's always Black and Latinos that are being over-policed, right? And so they're more likely to receive long sentences. Black and Latino people are more likely to be wrongfully convicted and are less likely to be perceived as rehabilitated.
I want you to talk about these releases, Carmen, because when you hear, the stats that you're dropping right now, people are like, well, wait, is this a good thing? Do we want criminals running around New York? People are quick to react like that. No, absolutely. We see the headlines in the New York Post, which is obviously a right-wing propaganda machine. But I want you to explain to our audience, though, who, might listen to you say that and explain to them how they end up here and what type of releases we're talking about.
Yeah, so, I want to be very clear. The reason why there are so many Black and Latino people in prisons is because Black and Latino communities are over-policed. Black and Latino schools are over-policed. That creates a pipeline to the criminal justice system. So it's not because we're committing more crimes, or it's not because, we are more violent. It's because we have more police in our communities versus alternatives to incarceration or services that will promote healthy lives, right? So for instance, there's a huge conversation that happens around defund the police, and people are like, oh my God, what do you mean? We can't be without police. But we know in the state of New York that the budget for police here is close to $6 to $10 billion. What we are saying is let's reallocate some of that money back into the community to provide mental health services, to provide books in schools, to provide healthy after school programs, all these different things. And so that's why, when I think about what's happening in Black and Latino communities, it's not because we're just violent people, and it's not because, we're set up to be incarcerated. It's because we are over policed. And so I just want to be very clear, because I was having this conversation yesterday at a conference, LULAC. People are like, well, why should Latinos care? I'm like, because it impacts our lives. And so it's important to understand, like, when it comes to, the fair and timely parole, right? We already know that the criminal justice system is the modern manifestation of racist oppression, the new Jim Crow. That's know
right.
that.
That's right.
From the arrest and pre-trial detention and sentencing to parole, racial bias is present at every stage in the system. This doesn't happen to our white counterparts. It happens to Black and Latinos. And that's why Black New Yorkers represent roughly 15% of the state's population, but nearly 50% of the people in state prisons. And so what we're asking is for people to come out and vote for this piece of legislation, to understand that they can make a difference when it comes. This is our family, right? Like, I remember having my brother who was on probation, and I used to think, like, what can I do to make sure that he doesn't stay in the system? I became a probation officer. A lot of the people that are on probation don't deserve to be on probation. They don't have the resources for representation in courts. They don't have the resources in order for them to actually not have 911 called on them. And again, it's always about over-policing.
Well, so Carmen, for the audience to better understand, even digging in deeper, is you have a large population of people on parole or trying to get parole who are still locked up, that are over the age of 55.
Right.
That were, and we all know the ridiculous sentencing laws that were at work in the well, I mean, let's not even talk about the 70s, but specifically the 80s and 90s, right? So you have a lot of people who are locked up who should at least get an opportunity to get their case reviewed so they can get looked at for parole, who are elders, and that's a part of this bill also.
Right. So there's also, let's also understand that, like, ultimately prisons and jails are unhealthy and dangerous environments. Decades of national research show that incarcerated people age at an accelerated rate. That means that if you're 55 years old and you are in prison, you are more like a 65-year-old or a 70-year-old health-wise. That is due to inadequate access to healthcare, poor nutrition options, and the general stress of being incarcerated. There are two people that are examples of elders who died before they ever had the opportunity for release. Despite their change or their transformation and positive contributions to their peers in the community as a whole, Valerie Gator and Benjamin Smalls died inside prison. The elder parole bill could have provided these two a chance to come home. This bill would create opportunities for a parole hearing for people 55 and over and who served at least 15 years in prison. So talk about, I think about one of the elders that I worked with inside California prisons in Tracy. He had served 25 years. His name was Ernie Varela. He was from Fresno. And he had been organizing inside the prisons to bring peace. I worked with him when I was working at Barrios Unidos, and he died inside the prison because he could not receive adequate health care. That left such a hole in the prison as it pertained to kind of like the work that happens in politics, right? The way in which the culture is. Ernie was somebody who was contributing positively inside the prison system. He was a leader. He had been rehabilitated. He had been there for over 25 years, but there was no access to elder parole. There was no access for him to go up in front of the board. And so I think about people like Ernie, right? Somebody who has served such a long time and deserve to come back home. They cannot be taken care of by the system. They need to be taken care of by people who are their family members and who love them and be in the community.
So when we go out to vote for mayor this year, next month in the primary, In
The
New York
22nd,
City.
right?
In New York, yeah. Well, New York City. Well, when will these bills start to appear, and whom do we reach out to, and how do we keep the pressure on here? Because I do think it's a very important conversation to have, right? Because there's definitely people we know that are in the system that are older and or got some ridiculous sentence and need to be up for review.
I mean, look, people just need to when you go out and vote, make sure that you vote for these bills. They're important together, and I'm gonna tell you why. Is because they would expand parole eligibility and make the process more fair. Like I said, for Black and Latino people, this process is biased. They would also address the aging crisis in prisons, reunite families, reduce racial disparities in parole release decisions, and free up to nearly 500 million that can be used for the things that can actually make difference in communities, like education, housing, substance use disorder treatment, and healthcare. So go out, vote for these bills. Again, it is the fair and timely parole and elder parole. And you go out and you actually require for the people that you're going out to vote for, right? Like you said, the 22nd is a day in which we go out and we're voting for a DA, Manhattan DA. We're voting for a new mayor. A lot of these people need to have this on their agenda. If they really care about New York, they also need to care about criminal justice reform as well as parole reform.
The bill number is S15A. I'm looking at the New York State Senate site right now. You can actually go and click. I click that I supported this bill. But you can go look at the sponsors, the co-sponsors, who brought it to the floor, all of those things.
I wonder if
Senate
any of the
bill
people,
S15A.
any of the current people running for mayor, has any of them spoken about the bill?
I have not heard it. And I will say a lot of the people leading in the mayoral race right now, they're being very careful because of the public safety issue that's going on, so gun violence, violence in the street, violence on the subway, the anti-Asian hate that's going on. All of these things represent violence in the city. So I would be interested to see a candidate try to find the space to talk about parole reform when it sounds like a lot of candidates are talking about more police on the street instead of being more sophisticated about how they're going about talking about this. It'll be very interesting.
Right. But I think there's a difference here, Ebro, right? And Laura, is the fact that we're not talking about releasing people just to release them. We're actually saying make the process fair, right? We're also saying, can you reevaluate if somebody has been there for 15 plus years, who have been in prison for 15 plus years and are aging out, are over the age of 55, let's reevaluate their case. That's what we're saying. We're not saying, hey, let's just release everybody who fits under this category. We're saying make the process fair and timely for Black and Latino folks. And that's justice, right? That's and oftentimes people think, well, there's so much crime, there's so much violence that's happening. That's going to continue to happen if you don't allocate resources back into the community. And so what we're asking is pass these bills, right, that are in the New York State Legislature, fair and timely parole and elder parole, make parole timely and fair, and reevaluate the people that are in prison who are over the age of 55 and have served a 15-year sentence, and give them access to elder parole. That's what we're asking. We're not saying
I'm with you. I'm just letting you know that these mayor candidates right now don't seem like they're able to communicate nuance. You know what I mean? And because there's just a lot of, it feels like the mayoral candidates are just being very careful with how they talk about police and how they talk about reform when it pertains to criminal justice reform.
I feel like Diane Morales was the one who was the most open about it.
Yeah.
Diane Morales is phenomenal. Obviously we have our problems with Andrew Yang, and I have some problems with Eric Adams also. But It'll be interesting to see who really, because the conversation's taking place. It's at the New York State Senate level right now, that the parole reform. So it's definitely something that's happening on the state level for sure. The mayoral candidates here in the city, and maybe they're not addressing it also because it's a state level issue.
And I think it's tricky when people are running for office. They want to be perceived as hard on crime, right? That's kind of been the nature of people's election, right? And so when you're talking about really transforming the system and creating these types of opportunities, you're probably 1 in 10 candidates that are talking about this. And it's because we need something different. What's in place right now is no longer working, right? We are not going to sit by and allow for this system to continue to swallow our Black and Latino family members. Our Black and brown communities should not be over policed. And we're actually asking for something that should have been given to us a long time ago. Give us a fair chance, right? Give us a timely opportunity to receive what others are receiving. And the fact that if anybody believes that somebody should be in prison over the age of 60, who has served their time and has been rehabilitated, I mean, imagine we are no longer serving that person. And so it's important for us to understand how much it costs to keep somebody incarcerated in the system and how much it would cost for us to serve them in the community. It costs about $150,000 a year to keep somebody in the prison industrial complex. And it costs about $20,000 to $40,000 to serve them in the community. And why don't we serve the community with their loved ones?
Well, it's because we have a culture, an incarceration culture. And we think
That's
that we're
right.
actually making progress when we just keep locking people up, when really we're just creating more and more holes in our society with this whole culture. And until we wake up as a society and really want to do work to support people who are the most vulnerable, and really begin to understand the way this white supremacist system has worked to break down the Black family, the Black and brown communities, break people down emotionally and mentally, until we start to dig into that, we're never going to be able to really make the true progress that we believe our society is capable of. That's the real answer, and this is part of that work. Carmen Perez. Now, are your current role you're at Justice League NYC?
CEO, president of the Gathering for Justice. Yeah, I'm one of the founders of Justice League NYC. I've been, kind of taking a step back because I'm really invested in cultivating the leadership of other people. And so we have young people who've been leading Justice League NYC in my absence, Luis Hernandez and Karis Love, and all these phenomenal young people have been stepping up to the plate. But I'm back. And so you will see me out in the streets. I'm also working to support the leadership of Robert Rooks, the new CEO at Reform. And so you will see me working more closely on continuing to advocate probation and parole reform from that side of the aisle.
Now, the Reform Alliance, which is something we heard about under Meek Mill and Michael Rubin and Jay-Z and I think Van Jones, those are the people who kind of kicked it off. The work continues in every state, the work that they're doing, because, I don't think people quite understand what the work is for reform. And it's focused on prisons, correct?
It's focused on probation reform, very similar to what happened with Meek Mill. Luckily, I was fortunate enough to work on Meek Mill's campaign in collaboration with Rock Nation. Desiree Perez and Danya Diaz brought me into that campaign. And so Justice League was one of the leading organizations. And so it's a natural fit for me to kind of come back full circle as somebody who was working on freeing Meek Mill, really humanizing what was happening to him. I think a lot of people were saying, well, he's a celebrity, he's got a lot of money, why should we care? Well, because at the age of 19, right, Meek Mill is like so many other young people who get caught up in the system and don't really deserve to be on probation or parole for 15 years or life parole. I mean, Could you imagine if you were constantly having to check in with somebody? Can I fly here? Can I go there? If you're actually seeing with somebody who's on probation and parole, those are all technical violations. And so recently, Reform launched a new campaign called Give Life Back. You could go onto the website and check it out. And so what they're really trying to do is to bring awareness to these technical violations that are happening that create, again, a pathway to incarceration. A lot of folks that are currently incarcerated are because of these technical violations, crossing state lines to go see somebody that they love, actually being in the presence of either alcohol or also being in the presence of people who are on probation and parole. And you don't always know that, right? Like, I'm in spaces all day with people, well, not under COVID, clearly. But before I was in spaces with people, I never knew if they were on probation and parole. It's not like if somebody, there's no like phenotype, right. For folks that are on probation and parole. And so, that's a technical violation. You could be incarcerated because of that. But yes, I'm here, and Georgia, they passed a probation bill in Georgia. We are also in Mississippi. There was a victory in Mississippi in collaboration with the coalition out there. We're also in Pennsylvania, where Meek Mill is from. And so there's a lot of wonderful work happening there. And we are also going to be hosting, in collaboration with the Gathering for Justice. And that's the beautiful thing about our relationships, is that, it's important for us to work with one another, and there's enough for all of us. But there's a town hall that's happening, and it's happening this Thursday. It's our Elder Parole Town Hall. And it's going to be on the Gatherings platform. And we're going to be hearing from people who are directly impacted, people who've been working to make sure that they advocate for folks that are on elder parole. And so it's called We Keep Us Safe. We'll be talking more about parole justice Thursday, May 20th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, during the Gatherings for Justice Town Hall. And so it'll be live on Facebook, so people could visit our page at Justice League NYC. And so it should be a really great conversation that will continue.
That is Carmen Perez. We love you. Keep going. We here. Let us know how we could keep helping and pushing people and getting them the information. But definitely look up the probation reform and the elder probation reform bills that are currently at the New York State level. Follow Carmen Perez on your Instagram. What Instagram should they be following?
They could follow at Gather4 Justice, at NY Justice League, and at Reform Alliance, as well as you can follow me at MS Lady Justice 1. So I appreciate you all. You all are so amazing. And I know your listeners are listening to you from all over the country. So there's also probation and parole reform happening in your state. So check it out.
Thank you very much, Carmen.
Thank you,
Take
Carmen.
Care. Bye.
Bye.